Hello, everyone. Welcome to the water properties um, notes and lecture. Like we have been doing for the other weeks where we have had a lecture and notes, I need you to either follow along on the Cornell notes that I have attached in the assignment on Google Classroom. Sorry about last week, but I will make sure they're attached this week. You can just fill out that document and make sure that that same document is attached when you turn it in. Or if you'd prefer to handwrite them, totally fine. Please get out your own piece of paper and remember that you are setting up your notes to look like this. So we have the cues on the left where you're going to write the title or the heading of the slide, as well as any questions that you come up with during the lecture. And then on the right side, that's where you put the notes, the definitions, or the pictures. Today, particularly, you're going to have to draw some stuff out because it is really important when we're thinking about the properties of water to understand how water is a polar molecule and how it bonds to itself through what is called hydrogen bonding. So really important for you to understand visually what those two ideas look like. So, like I said, we're going to talk about water's amazing properties. And all of these properties can be tied back to two things. One, the fact that water is a polar molecule, remembering what polar molecules are last week. That means a molecule that has a partially negative end and a partially positive end. And because of the polarity of water, and these positive and negative ends, water molecules can also what is called hydrogen bond between each other. So the positive end of one water molecule is going to be attracted to the negative end of another water molecule because positive and negative charges attract. So the first thing is we have to remember and fully identify that water is in fact polar. Now let's remember we've talked about water being polar because it is not symmetrical. It is not perfectly symmetrical. If you cut that up and down the middle, it might look okay, like it's the same on both sides here, but if you cut it this way, the top and the bottom are different from each other. Also, we don't really get into this, but all molecules are actually 3D. It's not just flat like this. So that's if we were to look at a 3D water molecule, it's even more obvious and apparent that it is not symmetrical. So each end of the molecule has a slight electrical charge. The oxygen is pulling the electrons towards itself, so it has a slight negative charge because it is more electronegative. The hydrogen has a slight positive on it because those electrons that it had are being pulled towards the oxygen. These molecules with a charge are polar. So without a doubt, you should be able to identify that water is a polar molecule. All right, here are your notes to record. Make sure that you also have this drawn somewhere in your notes with those lines of symmetry to remind you water is not symmetrical, therefore it is polar. Great. And like I was saying earlier, is because water molecules have these negative and positive ends, and positive and negative things are attracted to each other, water molecules hydrogen bond to each other. So the positive and negative ends attract to each other. So the water molecules tend to what we say is stick together. And this is hugely important in so many of the properties that we're going to look at today. So hydrogen bonding is the positive and negative attract each other. So the water molecules, two different water molecules or hundreds or thousands of water molecules are going to stick to each other because of the partially positive and negative ends that they have. So record that for me here. I also want you to make sure you have a drawing. So you should draw, this is a drawing of three water molecules showing how they are attracted to each other. So this is one water molecule here with the oxygen polar covalently bonded to two different hydrogens, the partial negative, partial positive end. The partial positive hydrogen end of this water molecule is attracted to the negative, the oxygen end of another water molecule. Okay. So please draw this out in your notes for this hydrogen bonding section as well. Here's again another image to just kind of visualize this for you, is that we have water is this polar molecule that they now is stuck together. And these hydrogen bonds make the water molecules, their bond, it's not like a bond in a molecule, but there is a connection now between all of these water molecules. They have stuck together and that there's some sort of form. And as we think about molecular science, there's then this certain amount of stability and strength and rigidity because of this bonded and connectedness between these water molecules. And that's exactly what we're going to see. So water's properties, there's a whole bunch that we could talk about. We're going to focus on 3 in particular that you saw last week in your lab. 4, sorry. And then a couple extra ones that I think are important for us to know and understand, especially because you see them all the time. So properties of water, water is essential to life and it behaves differently than almost any other compound. All of these interesting properties can be tied directly to water's polarity or to hydrogen bonding or to both. So as we go through each of these properties of water, it's going to be important for us to be able to identify why that property of water exists. And the answer is either going to be because water is polar or because of hydrogen bonding. Okay. So please write this down now. Great. The first property we're going to talk about is cohesion. So remember we had as a vocab word when we talked about covalent. Co is together. So what cohesion is the idea that water molecules are attracted to each other. Water molecules stick together. And why this occurs is because those water molecules are attracted to each other because of the polar ends, or because they're polar. One water molecule has a negative end that wants to attract to the positive end of another water molecule. So water molecules are cohesive purely because the hydrogen bonds that form between polar molecules. Now, where we see this are dewdrops forming, or the fact that water comes out in a stream, or like when you pour or water pouring out of your sink or out of a glass, that you can see those water molecules are sticking together. So record that now here. Okay, so adhesion is the attraction of molecules of different substance. So ad is kind of like opposite. So water not only likes to stick to itself, that's what cohesion is. Adhesion is the fact that water will stick to other things. And why is that? Well, it's again because water has these 2 ends. So no matter what another substance is, as long as it has a charge, some part of a water molecule will stick to it. Okay? So in this example here, let's say, I don't know why that won't go away, but let's say this leaf is negatively charged. That means that there's the positive end of those water molecules will be attracted to it. Over here on the left, you see that those water drops stick to the end of those needles, or this is called a rain chain. So the idea that water usually coming off of a house can be directed to a specific place because the water molecules will stick to the chain and then go directly into a bucket or container of some sort. So please record that information now. Now, the combination of cohesion and adhesion is the attraction of water molecules to other things and to itself allows water to cling to and climb up tubes. So go against gravity up something. And this is because of polarity, the polarity of water. So because of adhesion and cohesion is why capillary action can occur. So the most obvious example that you've probably seen or should think about are plants. So how do these giant old trees get water from the roots all the way up to the leaves? Well, there's these tiny tubes that water is pulled up because it forms this long chain of water molecules, and it is simultaneously attracted to the tube. So as water is evaporated out of the leaves, it pulls those water chains up those tubes and bringing them up to the leaves. So capillary action is the combination of adhesion and cohesion. I always just liked this imagery of that it literally water molecules are clinging to each other and to another substance, and that's what allows them to go up a tube. The last one is surface tension. So surface tension is that tight film on the top of water. And why it occurs is because of hydrogen bonding. So when we looked at those, or if we look at the hydrogen bonded molecules of water, they form almost this like lattice structure, and that creates almost this film or surface on the top of water. So some examples are a water strider, or if you want to look up this funky little lizard in the middle, that's a Jesus lizard, because he walks on water. This person, why does it hurt if you ever belly flop? Is because you don't just cut right through that water when you go and land on, if you land from high enough and flat enough. It literally feels like you're hitting a surface, and that is because there's surface tension on the top of water. So please record that information now. Great. So last week we did the Water Olympics lab, or you at least watched it. And what we saw was some of these those four particular water properties. We saw them in each of these lab experiments. So the pole vault, where we filled the cup of water and added pennies until it went over, you saw cohesion. You saw the water molecules sticking together to form that dome over the top of the cup. And then you saw surface tension that, again, allowed it almost to create this like film where that water didn't just spill out everywhere. It was stuck together there at the top. We saw cohesion and adhesion for the balance beam, where we were putting water droplets on the top of a penny. The water molecules stuck together again to form that dome of water at the top. But then also we saw that those water droplets stuck to the penny. They weren't just immediately sliding off. So cohesion and adhesion. We saw surface tension for the pepper sprint, where we had this pepper on the surface of the water, added the drop of soap, and they pushed away very quickly. That's because the surface tension was broken when the soap hit the surface, and that pushed the pepper out of the way. Distance running, so those were the different paper towels, or you could have used any sort of towel or tissue or anything like that. But we saw adhesion, cohesion, and therefore capillary action, is that the water again was able to climb against gravity up, and that was because the water stuck to itself and it stuck to the paper towel. Last one we saw is it was really a great example of surface tension. So setting those paper clips on the top of the surface of water, they weren't floating, because if you knocked them or you didn't get them on their right, they sunk to the bottom. But instead, they're literally light enough to sit on that surface that is created because of the cohesiveness and the hydrogen bonding that occurs with water molecules. So again, if you got up and close and saw this, it looks like it's sitting on the top of the water. So there are a couple other properties of importance that I just wanted to make sure that we also have talked about briefly. So the fact that ice floats is really weird, because most of the time the solid form of something is going to be more dense, because if we think about molecules in a gas form are going to be the furthest apart. They get closest together as a liquid, and then they're really, really closely, tightly packed as a solid. Now, with ice and water, when water is frozen and turns into ice, actually because of hydrogen bonding, the water molecules, instead of getting really close together, they kind of push slightly apart, and they form these really nice crystals. That's why ice kind of looks like a crystal. And so what happens is the water actually expands a little bit. So that's also why you don't want to leave certain things in your freezer, because it will bust, because water expands when it turns into ice. Because it expands, that means that it is therefore going to be less dense, and ice then floats in the liquid form of itself in water. An example of this are these huge icebergs that actually do float, even though they are thousands or tons and tons, very, very heavy. So write that, please. Another one is high specific heat, and this is just the fact that it takes a lot of energy to heat water. So first of all, you might notice that it does usually take a really long time, and it's not just a figment of your imagination to boil water. But the truth is that it does take a lot of energy to heat up water. So for example, is if you think about like places like that are near large bodies of water, their temperature in those areas tend to be kind of more level. So, like in California near the ocean, because all of the energy from the sun is absorbed by the ocean, and so the temperature of the area is pretty level. It takes a lot of energy because of the hydrogen bonds that are between those water molecules. So to heat that water up, you have to also break those bonds between those water molecules. So that means you have to put more and more energy into it. Record that, please. And then the last property I think we're talking about today is this idea that water is a universal solvent, meaning it can dissolve a lot of things. It is most commonly used solvent. And again, this kind of is similar to what we talked about with adhesion, is that water is able to dissolve many things because it is polar. So because it has this positive and this negative end, it's attracted to whatever charged thing you might have. So some terms that are often thought about when we talk about something being a solvent is hydrophilic or hydrophobic. So things that mix with water are hydrophilic. Things that don't mix with water are hydrophobic. So again, the idea hydro means water, a phobia is a fear. So examples are salt, sugar, acid, bases. Those are all things that dissolve in water because they have charges or they are polar. The things that don't dissolve in water are going to be non-polar substances, like something like an oil. We all know that oil and water do not mix. Please record that now. All right, so that was the last bit of notes for this week, about water's properties. Good work, you all. Thank you for being so detailed with all of this and for listening carefully. Good luck and enjoy the rest of the week's assignments. See ya.